Do tariff wars help the economy or leave everyone involved worse off?
Go ahead. You kill her, I'll kill him.
Go ahead. You kill him, I'll kill her.
Knock yourself out. You kill her, I'll kill him.
Ha ha ha. This is me laughing. You kill him, I'll kill her.
This is me before Ultra Slim Fast. You kill her, I'll kill him.
Wait. There's gotta be a better way to settle this.
Why don't we find out? This video was made possible by my patrons, Christian Delorme, Just Another ANCAP, Joshua Bartlett, Scorch88, and all other patrons at the additional tiers. Thank you so much to all of you. Hello everyone, this is My 2 Cents, and today I'm going to be looking at a video put out by James Allsup in defense of President Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum. Allegedly, these tariffs are to protect the American steel and aluminum industries from losing jobs to places like China. But if history is any indicator, they'll only lead to overall increased economic hardship for everyone. The government will never be able to achieve the levels of prosperity that the free market can, which is why there is a strong correlation between lack of economic freedom and wealth inequality. Let's get into it.
Right, so first of all, what is a tariff? A tariff is similar to a tax. It's charged, usually as a percentage, on specific classes of imports into a country. For example, if there were to be a 25% tax on shoes being imported from China, and I imported $1,000 worth of shoes, then I, as the importer, would also have to pay $250 to the US government.
Hence, a tariff is a tax. It's the consumer who wishes to voluntarily exchange his own money for a good or service being forced at gunpoint to give money to a third party, the government, who otherwise has nothing to do with the exchange.
Let's say there's an American shoe company we'll call USA Shoes, and there's a Chinese company called China Shoes. USA Shoes are made in America by American workers that are paid a fair wage and contribute to the American economy. China Shoes are made in China by sweatshop workers, and their wages are reinvested into the Chinese economy. Because China Shoes uses sweatshop labor and doesn't pay their employees fairly, they can produce shoes for less than USA Shoes. As a result, if they flood the market with China Shoes, they can undercut USA Shoes to the point where USA Shoes will go out of business, taking those thousands of American jobs with them.
It's worth noting that Allsup doesn't get into a discussion of what constitutes a fair wage. China currently ranks 110 on the Index of Economic Freedom, and its economy overall still ranks mostly unfree. State-owned businesses dominate the Chinese financial sector, and so it's no surprise that Chinese laborers get paid ridiculously low wages compared to Americans. The link between the lack of economic freedom and wealth inequality has long been noted, such as in a 2013 study conducted by Illinois State University. I would fully support the Chinese embracing a more free market system to the benefit of their own people. But yes, Allsup is correct that because China heavily regulates its own economy, workers as a result end up having a worse-off financial situation. However, with this in mind, remember that Allsup is arguing that we, America, ought to embrace more government regulation of our economy.
The American government puts a 25% tariff on the importation of Chinese shoes. It raises their price to be comparable with those of American shoes, thus financially disincentivizing the purchase of Chinese shoes and creating a situation where more consumers are more likely to buy USA shoes.
Yes, but still at a higher price than they would have had the US not put the tariff in place. Americans are now forced to spend more on shoes and put money that would have been invested in other parts of the economy towards shoes.
That same scenario is effectively what's going on right now with Chinese steel, Chinese electronics, and just about every other manufactured good. They're made for cheaper in China than Americans can make them for here in America, and as a result, when they're dumped onto the American market, they sell for less and put American manufacturers out of business.
Incidentally, while these tariffs are being sold as a measure against China, the US actually imports more steel from Canada than any other country. China actually ranks behind 10 other countries that the US imports steel from, and it is only the fourth largest exporter of aluminum to the US. Businesses in countries like Canada and South Korea are actually more likely to be affected by Trump's tariffs than China,
taking American jobs with them. Now, that's the overview on why a tariff is implemented and what it is. Let's look specifically at the history now of American tariff policy. Up until the early 20th century, tariffs made up the greatest source of federal revenue. In fact, an incredible 95% of all federal revenue used to come from import tariffs. The Tariff Act of 1789 was one of the newly formed American Congress's first acts, and tariffs comprised the plurality of federal revenue until the introduction of the income tax in 1914. Tariffs have historically been used by the government government in order to generate revenue and protect American business. It wasn't until the 20th century that we decided to begin taxing our own income instead of taxing the importation of foreign products.
Let's add an important piece of history that Mr. Allsup chose not to mention here. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. Shortly after the stock market crash of 1929, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was passed both as a punitive measure against European governments and a protectionist measure for the American agricultural industry. Sound familiar? The Great Depression was just beginning at this time, with unemployment having risen above 8%, and as European farmers were recovering from World War I, competition resulting from agricultural imports drove prices down and were viewed as a threat to the American agricultural industry. Supposedly, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act would encourage Americans to buy only from American farmers, and would thus stimulate the American economy. The problem was, even if it was now cheaper to buy American, everyone was still forced to pay more, which meant less money being spent in other industries. Further, European countries raised their tariffs in response, which meant the US exported less, stifling the economy even further. Banks in the US and abroad began to fail, and many historians say that the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was the genuine start of the Great Depression. That's the thing about so-called tariff wars. Everybody loses. If other countries want to put tariffs on our imports and hurt their own consumers in the process, let them. We don't need to drag ourselves down in the process.
Take a look now at some of the criticisms of tariffs. On Ben Shapiro's show on Friday, he flew off the handle and yelled about how dumb and stupid and not good Trump and dumb and stupid he thought Trump was for proposing these new tariffs. Here's one of the tamer cuts from the Friday show. He was totally off the handle.
Okay, this is all stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It's economically illiterate. Okay, I was writing full pieces in March 2016 about why Trump's trade policy was idiotic. He and Bernie Sanders basically have the same trade policy. Note to everyone, if you have the same policy on anything as Bernie Sanders, you're stupid. Does anyone think that'd be good for the economy? No, because this is stupid. STOOPID. Stupid. The price of beer is going to go up too. Every beer can in America is made with aluminum, which means that if you like your beer, you're not going to get to keep your beer. The price on it is going to go up, which is, I think most Americans are not going to be super happy with that.
Ben was a bit over the top with his comments, but he is right.
No, ma beer. This is the end of civilization as we know it. Bugman uprising when? You know, for a guy who claims to value facts over feelings, Ben Shapiro isn't exactly the paragon of honesty here. Given the amount of aluminum in your average can, the price of a can of beer would increase approximately half of 1 cent. In other words, your 12-pack is going to cost approximately 6 cents more.
6 cents per six-pack probably doesn't seem like much. But let's not look at this from the perspective of an individual purchase, but rather in terms of the whole economy. While the amount of beer sold annually varies from year to year, let's assume it's approximately 6.3 billion gallons consumed annually. This is the approximate amount consumed in 2012. 11 six-packs equals 1 gallon. So that means that with the increased price of 6 cents per six-pack, a cumulative $34,363,636 more would have to be spent in order to sell the same amount of beer that was sold prior to the introduction of the tariff. That's quite a bit of money that would have been invested elsewhere in the economy. However, the fact that the cost of beer cans is now increased means that it is more likely that beer sales will go down, which will encourage beer companies to try and keep their prices as low as possible so as not to lose more profit. When business costs are increased, a company only has 3 options if they don't want to lose their profits: raise prices, cut wages, or lay off employees and try to do more with less. Usually it ends up being a combination of all 3, but the Beer Institute estimates that the beverage industry cumulatively will end up paying $348 million in additional costs and lay off approximately 20,291 workers. If you work in the aluminum or steel industry, you're probably happy about Trump's tariffs. If you work in just about any other industry, you shouldn't be so excited.
I wonder why Shapiro would leave that fact out. We all know he is about the facts, after all. Another criticism of tariffs comes in a line you'll frequently hear from self-described conservatives. They will decry tariffs as social justice for corporations. Losing all your jobs to China. Need a safe space, stupid American. Tariffs are designed to protect American political and economic interests, of course. There's no doubt about that. And of course, tariffs wouldn't be necessary if American goods were cheaper than Chinese goods. So yes, this is government intervention. You can label it and dismiss it as social justice if you wish. But we need to ask ourselves, how much of our economy are we willing to jettison in the name of free trade and globalization and cheap products?
Exactly, which is why we have to look at the economy as a whole. How many other industries will be hurt at the expense of helping the steel and aluminum industries?
The Chinese and others will always be able to manufacture goods for less than we will. Their workers are paid a fraction of what ours are and have a fraction of our quality of life. In a race to the bottom, which is what competition is, those willing to live with the worst conditions will always win.
As I said before, this remains so because China is a totalitarian state that is severely lacking in economic freedom. Well, it's true that the fact that their workers work for less may seem unfair to Americans who want to work similar jobs domestically. The solution Allsup is proposing would move us closer towards the system that the Chinese are working with, and ultimately bring us down to their level. Whenever the government tries to fix the economy with regulations, there are unexpected consequences, which leads the government to add additional regulations, and so on and so forth until the free market utterly disappears and people are truly trapped in poverty. Should we follow the example of the Chinese? I hope not.
So the question isn't who can manufacture goods cheaper. We know the answer to that. It's the Chinese. Instead, it is how do we as a nation protect our economic and national security? Globalized trade has had the effect of bringing down the cost of goods, but that phenomenon has come with a cost. From 2000 to 2010, over 55,000 factories in the United States closed down, and along with them, 6 million manufacturing jobs were lost. That's right, 6 million manufacturing jobs. Some people point to our low unemployment as an explanation for why this really isn't such a big deal. However, keep in mind that we are also experiencing the lowest labor force participation rate since the 1980s. Fewer people now are working now than in the past, and much of that is due to the fact that the jobs they used to hold are simply no longer available.
This may seem unfair, but the reality is that in a free market, some jobs come to an end. When the automobile was invented, many horseshoe and saddle makers went out of business. However, as people moved from employment to unemployment, time was freed up, and as people found new ways to fill their time, new careers emerged. As I've said before, who could have predicted how many people would be earning 100% of their income on the internet today, back in 1995? Free market competition does mean periods of unemployment, but it also ensures that the market will correct itself towards maximum employment as people seek to meet their needs and wants with their own time and money. Welfare programs, tariffs, and other forms of government intervention stop this from happening and save some jobs at the expense of others.
It's due to, in large part, to globalization. America is headed down the path of becoming a nation of consumers, dependent on the world to manufacture all of our goods for us. This carries with it a significant risk. A lack of domestic industry places a nation at risk of shortages or price gouging at the hands of their trading partners. If America's steel industry goes under, for example, we will be dependent on foreign manufacturers to import our steel.
And if they start price gouging us, the door has just been opened for competition. I find it doubtful that the American steel industry would ever completely disappear, but the law of supply and demand states that if the price of imported steel rose, more manufacturers would attempt to enter the market, specifically in this case, the American steel manufacturers, which would in turn drive prices back down. Does Mr. Allsup think Americans are going to completely forget how to manufacture steel such that we'd have to have no choice but to capitulate to other countries who are now charging more than it was worth?
And that poses significant risks for American infrastructure, defense, and manufacturing. We can see this happening right now with oil imports coming from OPEC and Russia and Venezuela and these other trading partners. We are largely dependent on the exports of our trading partners to determine oil prices in the US. And if there's a shortage from OPEC or a shortage from Russia or a shortage from Venezuela, then we are left scrambling to fill the gap between the supply available and the demand for it. When ideally the situation would be we encourage domestic production of oil and natural gas, and as a result we would no longer be subject to price gouging or artificial shortages being established by OPEC or Russia. We would be able to manufacture oil and natural gas for ourselves. This would be the ideal situation.
The oil question would take quite a bit of time to discuss, but here's the bottom line. If it was cheaper to produce oil and natural gas domestically, we'd already be doing it. If America continues to buy from foreign countries even while they are creating artificial shortages, they do so only because it would still be cheaper than producing our own. As Thomas Sowell explains, when the price of oil falls below a certain point, low-yield oil wells are shut down because the cost of extracting and processing the oil from those particular wells would exceed the price that the oil would sell for in the market. If the price later rises, or if the cost of extraction and processing is lowered again by some new technology, then such oil wells will be put back into operation again. Certain sands containing oil in Venezuela and Canada had such low yields that they were not even counted in the world's oil reserves until oil prices hit new highs in the early 21st century. The free market works. Whenever it becomes cheaper to produce oil domestically and thus better for consumers everywhere, the US will do it. Let supply and demand do its job and everyone will be better off.
In a recent column, Pat Buchanan proposed that America should learn from Europe and European trade policies. The European Union nations place a VAT, or value-added tax, on every import from the US. Exports to the US get a VAT rebate. In effect, this functions like a tariff. This has the effect of increasing exports, which add to the nation's GDP and benefit domestic producers. The goal of tariffs, states Buchanan, is to increase domestic production. It is to incentivize foreign companies to build factories here, to sell products here, not build factories overseas and then sell products into the US.
And Europe thus hurts its own consumers because they'd only be buying from the US if it was cheaper than buying domestically. If they want to hurt their own consumers, be my guest, Europe.
This would, in turn, have a cyclical effect. More higher-paying jobs in the US means more people with disposable income, which means more saving and more spending on products, thus more demand, thus more need for manufacturing, etc.
They said the same thing back in 1930 with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It actually meant more expensive prices for everyone and less savings and investment.
Trump's proposed steel tariff would raise the price of a car approximately $45. $45. That's a small price to pay for the consumer, but it adds up for the manufacturer, and more auto manufacturers are going to be incentivized to move their factories back to America or build new factories in America, which, by the way, is the largest automobile market in the world. These tariffs wouldn't have measurable negative impacts for the average consumer.
For the average consumer. Well, as we did with beer cans, let's do the math. In 2017, about 6.3 million cars were sold. If the average price of a car increases $45, that's $283,500,000 additional funds that would have to be spent to keep auto sales the same. $45 doesn't seem like much when you're dealing with an individual sale, but the large-scale consequence is that hundreds of millions of dollars that would have been spent in other industries now will not, which means lower profits and jobs lost in those industries.
But they would be massively beneficial for Americans that work in manufacturing or live in Rust Belt states or towns or are affected by those people and their purchasing power. This will be great news for American workers and eventually American consumers. But there will be an adjustment period where companies will be taking a slight hit on their bottom line. But I'm okay with that. I would rather have Americans and American industry benefit in the long term, even if it means there is some short-term stress for coastal business elites and rootless transnational cosmopolitan economists. Cheap consumer goods are nice, I guess, but having a strong national economy, that's even better. And if I have to pay $45 more for a car, knowing that it was made in America and I'm helping pay an American worker's salary, that is without a doubt money well spent.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. When supply and demand is left to work, the market will always correct itself towards maximum employment, high-quality products, and low prices. Some people will lose jobs while others gain them, and innovation will cause some industries to disappear while simultaneously creating new ones. However, government intervention will always benefit some at the cost of others. As the government tries to correct its mistakes with previous regulations by adding even more regulations, well, the path down that road is a government-controlled economy, kind of like with what the Chinese are dealing with right now. Did you think about that? Anyways, this video was selected on the basis of a Twitter poll. Check my Twitter profile every Sunday to vote for one of my weekly videos here on My 2 Cents. Thanks to my patrons for your support, and that is my 2 cents, so take it for what it's worth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. You can also hit the bell to ensure you're notified every time I upload a new video. This video was made possible by my patrons. If anyone else would like to donate and help ensure that I have the time and resources to keep putting out content, for just $1 a month on Patreon or Maker Support, you'll receive your name listed in the end credits and the link to one of your social media platforms listed in the description. You can also support the channel by purchasing My 2 Cents merchandise or checking out my Amazon affiliate links. To follow me on Twitter, Minds.com, BitChute, WordPress, Gab, or iTunes, check out the links in the description. Uploads are every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so stay tuned for more videos.